she said, when people come to me and they have a lot of anxiety and they're vegetarians, I tell them that they either need to be eating fish or they're going to need to take a supplement, because we can't fix their anxiety without getting them to do some type of meat-based product. Would you agree with that?
Totally. And I should say, I really break it into plants and animals, because animal flesh is animal flesh, and we like to think fish, chicken, meat.
Yes. Dr. Mindy in the house. All right.
I appreciate that.
The carnivore diet.
Because of what we eat.
Honestly, you've really touched my heart.
So Fast Like a Girl, it's ready for pre-order now. I hope this book changes your life the way the information has changed hundreds of thousands of women that have applied it. From the bottom of my heart, enjoy, and let's get healthy together.
This is what I want to dive in with you. When we go to our community and we start talking about what to eat, there has never in my 25 years of doing this seen so much controversy around meat.
Mm-hmm.
The vegetarians think like you would think we're murderers if we eat meat. And then I've got people who are doing carnivore only that are healing from amazing, amazing conditions.
Yeah.
So,
but they can also sometimes be as radical as vegans. Yeah. So, and Paul Saladino doesn't help sometimes with that energy. So I'm happy to bring a softer, we're releasing actually the film for free for 1 week over Thanksgiving week.
Oh, amazing.
And on my website, and the whole idea behind it is like, can we stop fighting, and can we have some nuance? And can we all agree that we're on the same page, and maybe cattle have been unfairly vilified for what processed food and fossil fuels have done? So
beautiful. And that's kind of our message. Like, so we have a Facebook group of about 40,000 people that fast together once a month. Okay. And so what we do is we teach people like, okay, so that you have this fasting window, but then what are you going to eat in the eating window? And that's where all the arguments, I mean, literally the vegans and the carnivores are like going at it. And and I just want, like what you just said, I want to bring light to it. Like, where is the middle ground here? Because there's something for us all to learn. And I love that. I want to dive in with you on the environmental impact of this, because now I was a vegetarian for a decade. And I ended up becoming the sickest I've ever been, and had to go to more meat out of pure health. But can we start off with like why meat is vilified? Why is
You're
it
gonna love my film? I have such a great testimonial in there from Leah Keith. I don't know if you know who she is.
No.
Her health was wrecked, but she did it. She did vegan because she believed.
Me too.
In all of it, and she still believes in all of that. And I'm on the board of Animal Welfare Approved, and like Leah and I have become really good friends. But anyway, so you're gonna really love the film.
Awesome.
So I'd love to let your folks know about the free screening too, if that's all right.
Awesome.
If I could make a plug.
Oh, of course, we will promote the heck out of that. And
that'd be great.
We're big fans of like Kiss the Ground. I've been telling my community to go watch that. And
this is sort of like a deeper, more scientific dive.
Great.
Similar to what Kiss the Ground did, but with less pretty celebrities and like more science. I don't know.
You don't have any pretty celebrities. That's okay. We don't need the pretty celebrities.
I'll have Nick Offerman.
Yeah.
He's a celebrity.
There you go. There you go. Yeah. Yeah. No, I read Diet for a New America by Tom Robbins, and I was just after that, or John Robbins. After that, I was just like, oh my gosh,
Tim Robbins?
I am going to be a vegan.
Tim,
he was. Yeah, I always get Tim, Tom, John, but he was supposed to inherit the Baskin and Robbins fortune, was his story, and then he saw what was happening to animals, and so he became a vegan. And that's what I did for 10 years because of him and because of the ethical piece. And then I got really sick.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you from the farming end, I know what happens to plants when there are no animal inputs. So we can talk about that. Yeah.
Yeah, please. So let's just to bring our audience into this. Why is meat vilified? What is going on there? And how can we start to unravel the health part of that myth?
Yeah. So meat is the most polarizing food we have in our culture today. And it it represents so many things to human culture. It represents power, death. It's bloody, it's strong, it's very masculine, and it's kind of something you do or you don't do. And I wrote a little bit about this in the book Sacred Cow, about how it can at the same time be something that can kill you and heal you at this, depending on how you see it. And in Western culture, the vilification of meat really started with the Seventh-day Adventists, who believed that eating meat was gave you sinful thoughts. And so that reducing or eliminating meat and alcohol and spicy foods was the purest way to live your life. They're the ones who had these sanitariums in the 1800s, where it was sort of like a half hotel, half spa, where you would go and they invented jazzercise. They had these solariums where you would do aerobic workouts. I mean, there were really so many pieces of their lifestyle or things that we see today as really beneficial. Lots of fresh, clean air, clean eating. And at that time, we didn't really know much about germ theory. And so people legitimately were sick when they ate meat because we didn't know that old meat would make you sick. And, that's right at the time when we started leaving farms and living in more cities. And so the time between the death of the animal and when you ate it was longer, but yet we didn't realize like things like washing your hands would be good things. So it started out as a puritanical health movement. And actually, even today, that so Seventh-day Adventists were the ones who started the modern day nursing and dietetics movements.
Interesting.
And so this bias against meat as something that's sort of impure is still with us today in our celebrity culture, and also in the dietetics movement. When I was studying to be a dietitian, there was definitely an anti-meat energy that was going on there. It didn't turn into an animal rights issue until Ellen White, who was the head of the Seventh-day Adventists. She was wavering back and forth. She couldn't really stick to being a vegetarian. He was getting pretty sick. So she incorporated meat again, and she was on a tour in Australia, and a woman came up to her and said, "But how can you possibly eat animals because they're so meaningful, and killing them is so wrong?" And she's like, "Oh, that's why I shouldn't." So then towards the end of her life, right around the turn of the century, is when eating meat then became something that you didn't do because it was wrong to kill animals. So that was really something that, we hear a little bit more about from Eastern religions, which coincidentally in like Buddhism, reincarnation wasn't always a thing. And actually, it was only when reincarnation became part of Buddhism that eating meat was wrong because you might be almost eating your grandmother. So, but before that, avoiding meat was not part of that religion. So,
fascinating.
So what we have today is a culture where people are really concerned about our failing health, about the warming planet. They're really confused. They want that silver bullet. They want that magic goji berry that's going to give them longevity and ultimate health and an easy solution to the complex problems, right? So climate change is multifaceted, and so is diabetes and obesity. But we want that one thing. It's so much easier to have a scapegoat, which is what meat has become. And that's almost the name that we chose for the book and the film, was Scapegoat. It's literally when you just pin your sins to a sacrificial being and let it go. So meat has become that in our culture, and it doesn't need to be. Humans have been eating meat for 3.5 million years. It's not the meat itself that's the problem. And when we blame meat for our failing health, it allows the processed food industry to have a clean pass. And so ultra processed foods like the fake meat products that are out there, like all the other junk that invades the inside of our grocery stores, which is what is really the problem, that gets a clean pass. So they love the anti-meat movement. And so does the fossil fuel industry, because when we blame cow farts for climate change, it gives the fossil fuel industry a pass. It gives a lot of industries a clean pass. And so it's very convenient for big industry to have this anti-meat movement and all these almost evangelical anti-meat warriors that are out there infighting when we, as part of the like real food world, we should all be on the same page. We want real food. We want healthy people. We want thriving children. We want strong communities, and we want a clean planet. We can all be on the same side, whether or not we choose to eat meat, but animals are definitely part of the solution, not the problem.
Yeah. And I have to say that that's what I love about how you guys set this book up. It's brilliant. And I love that you are taking the health standpoint of meat. You're looking at the environmental and the ethical. I was like, that is brilliant, because some people, I'm just saying, according to my resetters, there's like so much finger pointing, and yet it's like, okay, let's break down what is your issue with meat here. Is it environmental? Is it ethical? Is it nutritional? And the experts that I've had on here will all say that, sure, if you want to say it's ethical, I can maybe line up with you there. But if you want to say it's better nutritional to eat plants over meat, that's where we're going to disagree. Would you say, if we just took the nutritional piece, do you feel like the human body is going to thrive more on meat than a meat-based diet than a plant-based diet?
Yeah. So the reason why we tackle ethics at the end of the book and weave it in throughout the film is because you can't have an intelligent ethical decision about whether or not to eat something without understanding the nutritional and environmental ramifications of eliminating that food. And so when we look nutritionally at meat, and this is a little bit of a game of whack-a-mole, like you were saying, there's the nutrition, but even when you go into, meat causes cancer, meat causes heart disease, the greenhouse gases, the water footprint, it's just never ending, right? And so it takes a lot of time to parse all of those out and intelligently address each one, and then we can talk about ethics, because to say meat is bad to eat is a very easy thing to say, but then to understand the ramifications of pulling meat away from growing children who need that nutrition, that's an ethical issue, right? To pull animals off the land and only use fossil fuels as fertilizer, which has its own issues, that's an ethical issue. So we really can't have an intelligent ethical discussion without first addressing whether the food is even nutritious for humans to eat in the first place. And so that's where we start with nutrition. Humans have always had animal sourced foods in our diets. We're omnivores. When you eliminate meat, you have to take supplements, and not everyone thrives on a meat-free diet. There's a lot of reasons why people would do badly on a meat-free diet. So, for example, vitamin A. Let's just look at vitamin A. So this is something that there is a plant-based form and an animal-based form. And in every situation, when there's a plant-based form and animal-based form of a nutrient, the body prefers the animal-based form. With the case of vitamin A, the plant-based version is beta carotene, which our bodies need to convert that to retinol, vitamin A. And in almost half of all humans, we can't make that conversion easily. So there you've got 50% of all the human population that would not do well, would have a vitamin A deficiency if they were not to get vitamin A through animal sourced foods. And we see that again with lots of other nutrients. B12 is something you can't get from plants. And so, yes, in America and privileged portions of America, we can just go to CVS or Walgreens and get a B12 supplement and an iron tablet and all the proper ratios of everything all lined up. But in a lot of places in the world, that's not a privilege that people have. And they may also live in an area where plants don't thrive and where they might not have access to, soy patties and plant-based burgers and protein powders and all the things you really need in order to do well on a vegan diet. And so I have no issue if someone personally wants to be vegan, but to then push that on people that don't have the privilege to push away nutrient-dense food, I think that actually gets into a very sketchy ethical situation.
Yeah, that's actually really, really well said. I have had a woman come onto the podcast, Allie Miller, and her specialty is anti-anxiety. Do you know her? Yeah, okay. Yeah. So her specialty is anxiety, right?
Yep.
And one of the things I remember that she said that just really stood out to me was she said, when people come to me and they have a lot of anxiety and they're vegetarians, I tell them that they either need to be eating fish or they're going to need to take a supplement, because we can't fix their anxiety without getting them to do some type of meat-based product. Would you agree with that?
Totally. And I should say, I really break it into plants and animals, because animal flesh is animal flesh. And we like to think fish, chicken, meat, just because we put meat in this category, but the body sees animal protein as animal protein, and that includes dairy products and eggs as well. So there's a big difference between a vegetarian or a pescatarian and a vegan who doesn't take in any animal flesh at all. And so I do believe that people who are vegetarian, vegan can do okay if they get enough animal sourced foods in their diet. It's when we eliminate all of them that we see the big major nutrient deficiencies.
So more like a vegan.
Right.
Like when you're not like a pescatarian.
Yeah. And the mental health ramifications are massive. In the film that we did, I interviewed Dr. Drew Ramsey, who is a psychiatrist in New York City and a farmer on the weekends. He goes back to Indiana on the weekends and is a farmer. And he is really big into, diet and mental health, and prescribes food to his patients. And absolutely. And even if we can just get a little bit of oysters or a little bit of liver in someone's diet who is generally plant-based, we see just massive improvements there. Mentally.
Yeah, I can imagine. So, and then on the nutritional level, what we hear a lot from our resetters is like, well, what about the China study? I'm sure you've heard this before. And what about cancer? Like, isn't it, am I supposed to go plant-based if I have a cancer diagnosis, or wouldn't I go plant-based to prevent a cancer diagnosis?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So the book that I did, Sacred Cow, which is right behind me, was actually published by the same folks that did publish the China study.
Oh, really?
Yes. So it's been Bella, and they're largely vegan publishers, but they loved our book. And one of the problems with nutritional research, and with the China study in particular, is that you can't take an observational study and prove cause. So you can't look at two things, like, for example, ice cream intake and shark attacks, which both are correlated with warm weather, right? That doesn't mean that eating ice cream causes a shark attack, right? But that's the same type of logic that is used in these observational studies. So you can show that people who eat meat tend to maybe be a little heavier than your typical vegetarian, or maybe they might also tend to smoke more or drink more than a typical vegetarian. But that doesn't mean that eating meat causes smoking, or that eating meat causes heart disease. It means that people who have that typical lifestyle tend to also get these other issues. But when they've looked at people who've shopped at health food stores, for example, so adjusting for lifestyle, what they've seen is there's no benefit at all in eliminating animal products. It's the same exact longevity between the folks who have similar lifestyle shopping at a health food store and whether or not they're omnivores or vegetarians.
And so then when you look at people who are plant-based, and this is the other thing we've learned from interacting with the public so much, has been that there's plant-based, there's vegetarian, there's vegan, and people get very particular about how you refer to them. So let's just use plant-based, when somebody's eating a whole plant-based diet, do you feel like if they don't take supplements, do you feel like they can be healthy and prevent disease in a plant-based diet only?
So are you saying no animal intake at all?
No animal intake at all.
Okay, so it appears that with no supplements?
No supplements. Like, I'm just a vegan, plant-based, that's all I eat. I don't supplement, and it's because of health and environment and ethical reasons that I do this.
Okay, well, I would argue that if you wanted to optimize your health, have a plant-based diet and add meat to it. That's the best way to live. Okay. Some people can tolerate more or less plants, and that's why some people have to eliminate all of them, because they are more difficult to digest than animal source foods. And that's why you see some people thriving more on a carnivore type diet. I think the goal for everybody should be to eat as large a variety as food that doesn't give them problems as possible. And so for some folks like me, it needs to be almost totally clean with no processed foods and just, chicken broth from scratch and stuff like that. Other people, you see them shopping at the regular grocery stores. They look like they're pretty healthy and they've got just junk in their carts. And, it seems like there's some people that do okay that way too. I'm just turning off my little alert that my dad was calling there. So, there's a wide spectrum of humans, right, that will thrive on a wide variety of things. But what we've seen throughout human evolution is that the nutrients in animal sourced foods were always the most prized. They are the most nutrient dense things you can eat. If you're looking to optimize your health and get as many nutrients as possible with as few calories as possible, you need to be including animal source foods in your diet. So I suppose there are people that are reporting that they're doing okay on a vegan diet. It seems that for most people, it's only a matter of time before their health starts to fail. I see it like a fast, like an extended fast, right? So it's like, you can go without certain nutrients. Some people can go longer than others without critical nutrients. And it really just depends on the, health of your gut, on your genetic makeup, on your overall stress levels. There's so many things that contribute to how well someone would do on an extended fast.
Yeah. We call it diet variation and fasting variation, that we need to create more variation in the timing that we're eating and what we're eating. And if you look at how the body's designed, when you first switch over to, let's say, a plant-based diet, there may be an uptick in your health. You might feel better, but like you said, I really resonate with this. There's just a matter of time that's going to stop working for you, because I don't believe that the human body's meant to eat the same thing over and over again. I think we're meant to go in and out of different foods that we're eating and different ways, different timing of how we're eating.
And also life cycles too, right? A child or an adolescent or somebody who's pregnant, I would strongly recommend they not be plant-based. But then maybe someone who's really fit and healthy in their 20s and 30s might do better. Anyone over 40, when we start to lose muscle mass, your protein requirements go up. And you can get 30 grams of protein from a 4-ounce, 200 calorie piece of steak, or from 750 calories worth of beans and rice. So, for those of us who aren't looking to gain a ton of weight, meat is just a more efficient way to get our nutrition and to feel satiated.
Yeah. And that's what happened to me when I switched out of being a vegan and switched within weeks, I started dropping weight. That's exactly what happens, because people do end up creating more carbs than they need to be. So, but now let's go back over to Dr. Paul Saladino, and let's look at his theories. I mean, he's got over 600, research studies proving that meat only and that vegetables are toxic. And I know toxicity of vegetables isn't per se your specialty. I know that you have an organic garden and a CSA. That has me scratching my head, how can a meat-only diet be good? To me, it's on the opposite end of this conversation from vegan.
Yeah. My personal opinion is that people should eat as many foods as they can that don't give them problems. I happen to be celiac, so I don't eat any gluten at all. My kids eat gluten and they're fine. But they don't eat excessive gluten. We're pretty clean at the house. I think that some people tend to be more sensitive to lectins or to components in tomatoes and nightshade type vegetables. Again, it's all on a spectrum. I think that the carnivore diet is a really interesting tool for clinicians to look at, especially when there's severe gut issues, right? And someone just clearly can't digest anything because their guts are so wrecked from modern foods.
Yep.
And so, broth and meat are really easily digested, a great way to get nutrition. But I don't think that everyone should be living a carnivore type lifestyle. I don't think that we necessarily have to fear food to that degree. And, there are things like hormetic stressors, which are good for the body. And so, I don't, I think, I think a lot of people are turning to carnivore and seeing results that they like.
Yes.
But if you want to have a weight loss diet, I don't think, or just a healthy lifestyle in general, I don't think it needs to be that extreme.
Yeah. Yeah, I did. So I've really sort of pushed the carnivore diet away because I was like, I'm part of my obsession is the microbiome, and I just didn't understand how carnivore could feed the microbiome. It just, everything I learned, it was fiber. And then I met Maria Emmerich. Do you know Maria Emmerich? Mm-hmm. She has all her books. So she has a carnivore cookbook. And so she was talking about how collagen is one of the best prebiotics for your gut bacteria. And so I was like, well, that's interesting. So what we did with our resetter group, we ended up doing a 7-day, what I called carnivore fasting, where I had everybody go 17 hours of fasting, and then all they did is eat meat. And we did this for 7 days. I did a stool test. So I did a pre-test and then a post-test, and all I did is eat meat for a week. And 2 things happened. One, people lost weight, joint inflammation went down. Like, it was crazy in 7 days to watch how many people healed eating meat only. On my stool test, the post-test, one of the most interesting things that showed up was gliadin and zonulin. And I hadn't eaten any wheat. So how the heck did that show up? And it's either was in like the grains, but we only do grass-fed, and I want to chat about conventional versus grass-fed meat with you. Mm-hmm. Or my thought is that it was in the inner lining of my gut, and that when you go on a meat-centric diet like that, it's really a detox diet and should be done in a temporary fashion. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't think that it's in the meat, because the way a cow digests food is very different than a monogastric animal, because they have a 4-chamber stomach, and it's really the bacteria in their rumen that are like breaking down the cellulose and then translating that into like fatty acids, which is what is fed to the cow. So I don't think wheat proteins are actually making it into the meat. Mm-hmm. That's just basic like physiology kind of,
Right.
I'm not sure on the, residual gliadin that it might have been in there before. It's possible. That would be more likely in my opinion, but I don't know.
It was just crazy. Like, I was like, how can this, I only ate meat for a week, and now this showed up in my stools. So and what do you think of the idea?
The test wrong.
Well, maybe. I mean, I never even thought about that. That's possible. Yeah, that would be on the testing end. The other thought, what do you think about the concept that it feeds that meat can really be a prebiotic for the microbiome? Have you?
Yeah, I've never heard that before. I mean, it could. I don't know that they only eat carbohydrate source, fiber and things like that. It's possible that they also like collagen.
Yeah.
I haven't looked into it as much, only because the last so many years I've been researching methane and land use and just really tackling the basics of like, does meat cause cancer? Does meat cause heart disease? What, explaining, how do I explain to someone who doesn't have a master's degree why nutritional research is wrong, why meat is a healthy food, why we need way more protein than the RDA, which is really important to me, that we need about double the protein that the RDA is. I go through the research of that and how they came up with the RDA, which is really kind of backwards research. And the RDA actually is set at the minimum, not the optimal level. So what we even think we should be getting as far as protein is way too low.
How much protein should we be getting, do you think?
At least 1.6 grams per kilogram of body weight, which is double the RDA. So I usually set most women that walk into my practice at least 100 grams of protein per person per day.
Amazing, amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so now let's move into this idea of conventional versus grass-fed, because this is the other thing that your book really is the first that I've seen really come out. And I told you my husband pre-ordered it just for that specific reason. He wanted to see the science between grass-fed and conventional meat. So I will be the first to say that we put our money in health, and we buy grass-fed only because we believe that that is the best way to be eating meat. Mm-hmm. But you don't necessarily believe that. Is that correct?
Well, it's not a matter of belief. It's a matter of what did I find when we did the research. So it's not an opinion. It's just stating the facts. So when we looked at the body of research that we have available today, there's just doesn't exist any decent evidence that grass-fed beef is significantly better for health than typical beef. I think that has to largely do with it's again the way that cattle digest their food. It's different than a monogastric animal. So we do see really big differences in eggs, for example, from a pasture-raised chicken to a typical chicken, because they're monogastric, and so whatever they eat, just like humans, it goes straight into our portal veins, straight into the liver, and those molecules are absorbed directly by our blood, right?
Right.
In cattle, it's totally different. So cattle are eating cellulose. It goes into their body. It gets broken down by the rumen, and then the byproducts of the breakdown go into their bloodstream. Okay. So they're just basically translating whatever fiber they're getting into food, like fatty acid. They're basically keto cattle.
Right.
And so that's why we just don't see a massive difference in grain finished versus grass finished. There is some studies have shown twice as much omega-3 fatty acids in grass fed, but that's not a reason to eat beef. No one should be eating beef for the omega-3s. You eat fatty fish for omega-3s, take fish oil. Another great way to reduce your omega-6s and increase your omega-3s is just to not eat grains or ultra processed foods and just eat more leafy vegetables and, less things that have omega-6 in them. But if you were to, consider all the fats in a steak, like a dollar bill. So you've got 100 pennies worth of fats, right? It's got about the same amount of pennies worth of saturated fat in both. There's not much of a difference there. Monounsaturated fat is about the same. So then in typical beef, you might have like 1 penny's worth of omega-3s. In grass-fed beef, you might have 2 pennies worth. So 2 pennies is twice as much as 1 penny, but it's not a lot of money.
Yeah.
You would still need to eat 8 pounds of grass-fed beef to get the omega-3s you could get in a 3-ounce piece of salmon.
Wow.
So that's really, I think a lot of people have really been inflating the nutritional value of grass-fed beef based on this fatty acid thing. And I think we have to look at it in the context of the human diet and not just twice as much. It's like twice as much of what, and is that even meaningful when we look at a week's worth of food? And if someone is eating beef 3 times a week, is 2 pennies worth of beef, of fatty acids from the beef versus 1 penny of fatty acids from the beef going to make any difference at all in their overall diet? No. But as a dietitian, I can tell them again, like, just don't eat all that bread and pasta and cookies and sugar, and instead eat more vegetables and fatty fish. And, yes, grass-fed beef, there's great reasons to eat grass-fed beef. You're supporting better food systems. Usually it's better animal welfare, although not inherently, but but usually there's a little more CLA. So that's a good thing in grass-fed beef. But really the differences are in the fats. We see a little bit more benefit in dairy products too, because they're a fattier end product than a steak.
Okay.
It's just that people don't eat a lot of tallow, and steak is a relatively low fat food.
Okay.
So that's
okay.
Why.
So, because this is something that comes up is, well, grass-fed is significantly more expensive.
Right.
So when you look at like somebody who's just on a tight budget, how can we help them make meat affordable?
Yeah. And so that's why this is really important to talk about, because there's programs like Meatless Mondays pulling meat out of the hands of children who, in New York City, 70% of those kids are homeless or low income. There's never been a study proving that taking meat away from kids will improve health outcomes. But yeah, we think it's better. We think it's better to just be plant-based. And for that mom that's maybe working 2 jobs, that doesn't have access to grass-fed beef, she should still feed her kids beef. It is still, the bottom line is meat is a nutrient-dense food, period. There are some great reasons to buy grass-fed if you can access it.
And would you still say if you can get something that hasn't had a lot of antibiotics and hormones pumped into it, are we still concerned about that from a meat standpoint?
So I did look into the antibiotics. We don't see antibiotic residue or more E. coli or anything on grass-fed versus typical beef. Hormones, we don't see more in a steak from a typical cow versus a steak from a grass-fed cow. Glyphosate, we're not seeing a big difference there. There likely are health benefits, but we just don't have any science to back that up. So, are there, flavonoids that are probably in grass-fed beef that might be meaningful to human health? Probably, maybe, but there's no studies right now showing any of that. And again, what that means is please buy meat. Don't be scared of typical beef. But if you know a farmer, or if you have a farmer's market and you can afford it and you want to make a statement, I think you should buy grass-fed beef. So I'm not endorsing the typical beef industry necessarily, but I'm also not condemning it. I think that even when cattle are finished on a feedlot, most of their life is spent on grass. A lot of people don't know that cattle aren't born and raised in feedlots and spend their whole lives on feedlots like typical chicken and pork industries, where those animals are 100% living in industrial settings. And also cattle finished on a feedlot, if you look at their entire lifespan, only about 10% of their diet is grain. The rest is either grass before they get to the feedlot, or they're also upcycling things that we can't eat that have no other value in our food system, like the leftovers from the ethanol industry. All the spent grains from that can be fed to cattle, and they can turn that into protein. The hulls from the pea protein industry, we can't do anything with that. It would just sit in a big pile and emit greenhouse gases if we didn't run it through a cow and turn it into protein. And so cattle actually can magically upcycle food that we can't eat and turn it into the most nutrient-dense food for humans.
Oh my gosh. I love that, because for our resetters, we've got people all over the world of all different socioeconomic backgrounds. And what I love about fasting is it's free. And so you don't have to have money to do it. And I realized when we start talking about some of these foods that are healthier, it's frustrating for the person who's on a really tight budget. It's like, I can't, it's easier for me to eat a bowl of vegetables. It's cheaper for me to eat a bowl of vegetables than to buy meat. And we have to find a way to make that, or it's cheaper for me to go to McDonald's. Like, we have to unravel that if we're going to make our country healthier.
Yeah. Well, and the funny thing is, in most places in the world, grain-fed beef is more expensive, and it should be more expensive. Cows eating grass should be cheaper because there's less inputs involved. And so it's only, in the US with the various ag policies and crop insurance that we're able to produce crops at such a low price to feed them to cattle, to fatten them up quickly and get them through the process.
So, okay, let's dive into the regenerative agricultural piece here, because this is another, I really want to unpack this because we haven't spoke much about it on my podcast. My husband is a huge protector of the environment, and he's done a ton of research on this. And this summer, my sister announced that she was going vegan because it was going to be better for the planet if she and her husband stopped eating meat. Mm-hmm. And my husband came running in with all these statistics of like, that's not true. And I realized I was in the middle of a discussion that I didn't know much about. So let's start with this idea that I'm doing something great for the planet by being a vegan.
Right. It may seem that way, and that's an easy story. And for every complex problem, there's a simple and wrong solution, right? I forget who said that, but that's certainly true in this case. And so, another thing we like to say in the book, it's not the cow, it's the how. So it's not the grazing animal that's the problem, it's how it's managed. And so when we look at our industrial agriculture system, first of all, there's no food system that doesn't cause death. So, and we can talk about that more in the ethics section when we get there. But our industrial agriculture system is based on large crops of just one thing, monocrops, planted over miles and miles and miles and miles. In order to make room for a gigantic corn or soy or wheat field, you need to annihilate whatever was there before. So whether that was a prairie or a forest or whatever, you have to wipe out all the plants and all the animals, every piece of biodiversity that was ever there to plant the one thing. And then you also have to make sure nothing else comes back. So you need herbicides, you need pesticides, kill all of the weeds, which are just other plants trying to come up. You have to get rid of all the insects. So now the birds have no plant foods to eat and no insects to eat. And with all these fossil fuel chemical inputs, you can grow one thing. So that's what our industrial food system is. It's not, small organic farms with, a little broccoli and a little carrots and then maybe a couple chickens over there. It is completely broken. Mm-hmm. Regenerative agriculture is a system where you have as much life as possible in one area. So that is, in order to have the healthiest ecosystem, you need the most diversity possible. So you want not just one animal, you want several types of animals. You want lots of different types of plants growing, because then if one bacteria comes and infests or a mold infests a certain type of plant, you've got other plants that can come back. So the least, the more simple the environment, the more susceptible it is to being destroyed. Right.
Interesting.
And so regenerative agriculture uses those principles and actually requires animals on the land in addition to plants. There are no natural systems in the world that only have plants. Animals are part of every system. They're pooping, they're burrowing through the ground, which also allows water to get in. And so when we have cattle on the grass, they're chomping at it, which actually then helps it grow back even stronger. The grass wants to be biologically broken down. If you don't have an animal chewing on it, it just oxidizes and dies. And then the roots can't really grow back. It doesn't have enough nutrients in the soil, returned in as part of a cycle from that animal. That's really contributing to the life underground as well as the life above ground. So we want as many wild animals as we can. We want as many different types of animals. We want as many different types of plants as possible to have the most closed loop system of a farm you can.
And how many, when you look, and I don't know much about the farming industry, but if you look at farms right now, Do you feel like regenerative agriculture is catching on, or do you feel like we have gotten so far off that explanation of what you just said? We've been tilling dirt and we've been spraying, and like what direction are we heading when it comes to this style of farming?
Yeah, well, so before white colonists came to the United States, this was how Native Americans, I mean, it wasn't, they weren't just hunting, they were actually using techniques like this to work with nature in order to, prune the forest just so that it attracted turkeys and things like that. So, this isn't really a new concept,
right.
But we have gotten really far away from that, and farms have gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. And when we lose small and medium-sized farms, we lose our small towns. And so I think a lot of us can relate to driving through small towns and seeing all the stores being boarded up. And it was really those farms that kept the towns alive. They employed people, they kept the feed store working. Once we got bigger and more mechanized and more corporatized, there was no need for humans to be working there anymore. There was no profit going locally. It was all going to multinational corporations. And so what we can do when we bring back small and medium-sized farms, which are making a comeback, I mean, it's going to take a lot of help on the policy level and on the consumer level to get back there again. But we can't continue farming the way we're farming right now. It's like we're farming with credit cards and we're just going deeper and deeper into debt, and we're not returning to that soil bank what it needs. And so regenerative farming is going to happen whether we proactively try to make it happen or whether it just happens to us. It's going to happen one way or the other. And so we need to get ahead of it a little bit if we want to, still be here when regenerative agriculture comes back.
When it comes back with or without us.
Yeah.
What do you think of this idea? And they say it in Kiss the Ground that we only have 60 harvests left in the majority of our soils, that we're running out of time.
Yeah, I did look into that quote, and it turns out that was said by a woman that worked at the United Nations just at a conference with no backup.
Oh,
and unfortunately, it keeps getting repeated as if it's some kind of scientific fact, but not many people other than me have really looked into like, where did this quote even come from? But I did talk to somebody at the United Nations and asked them what was going on. And they're like, that is not our official position at all. So, but whether or not it's 60 or some other limited number, we do have a limited number. We don't have to like debate like what the number is. But we are turning our soil into sand. We're losing the microbiome health of the soil, and we're destroying our own health in the process. And so going more plant-based is not going to fix any of that. There's no way to fix that if we just eliminate meat, because meat is not the problem of industrial agriculture. It's, industrial livestock production is not great. We can fix how we raise animals, but we absolutely have to have animal inputs in order to have healthy crops as well.
Yeah. And what do you think about, I was on a call the other day with a bunch of colleagues, and one of the things that we were talking about minerals, and we were talking about how mineral deficiencies show up in humans. And one thing we're seeing a lot in our fasting community is that if you're already mineral deficient and then you fast, you become even more mineral deficient. And it's like hair falling out and brittle nails and the long list of issues. And so this meeting, the colleague was saying, you need to ask your patients if they're eating food from dirt or if they're eating food from soil. And I thought, that is a really interesting way to sort of acknowledge the problem that you just mentioned, that in a regenerative agriculture type situation, we're growing nutrients and our vegetables from soil. Whereas when I walk into Safeway, which is a local supermarket here, and I buy conventional broccoli, I would think, based off of what I'm learning, I'm eating broccoli grown in dirt, in not a nutrient-rich soil.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny though, the fresh produce only makes up about 3% of our overall calories, and most of our minerals we get from animal source foods. And so I agree with you that we're not growing vegetables in as nutrient rich soil as we can. But it's really the intake of animal source foods and avoiding grains, which can block mineral absorption, is really the best way to get our minerals, especially shellfish and fish too, like oysters, off the charts for zinc. We know that zinc is really helpful for, things like COVID. You're building your immune system. Nobody eats oysters anymore. No one eats fish anymore. But people do eat beef, and it's a very mineral rich food for humans.
Yeah. Do you worry about the toxins in the waters when we're eating shellfish and seafood at all?
I don't eat a lot of freshwater fish. I don't worry so much about things like oysters and other filter fish. It's like liver, because it is a filter. It doesn't mean it absorbs it. It just filters it. And it's actually really mineral rich food. So I don't worry too much about that.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. I asked Paul Saladino about liver when you're eating liver, because he's such a fan of organ meat. Yeah. And I said, aren't you getting the toxins? And he said, that's not how the liver works. It's a filter. So it doesn't actually hold on to the toxins. It's just filtering the toxins. So I never thought of shellfish as sort of being that same sort of filtering. Oh, that's interesting. I like that. Okay, so let's sort of bring it back to our audience, because a large part of why I wanted to bring you on is so that my resetters could just grab this idea that we need to go back to quality of food. And we're fans of supplements and all of that, but I feel like your diet should be the first thing that gives you enough nutrients in order to be able to allow your body to thrive. Do you feel that, like, if we had like a good mixture of meat and vegetables, we stayed off of grains and the harmful oils, that we might never need a supplement in our life?
It's definitely possible. And one thing we do in the end of Sacred Cow is talk about, let's get rid of the emotion and just talk nutrient density. Let's just log your food in Chronometer. See what you're taking in. So Chronometer is awesome. Have you ever used it?
Yeah, we use Carb Manager, but Chronometer is great as well. Mostly to count macros, but yeah.
Yeah, well, the great thing about Chronometer is you can count micros. And so it'll show you your iron, your B12, your selenium intake, your copper. And so you can look at your diet and say, wow, I'm kind of low in copper. I wonder what I could eat to get more copper, things like that. So I really like Chronometer for that reason. And so we encourage people to just, put everything aside, all the emotion aside, and just what do you need to eat in order to get the most amount of your nutrients from a food? And it turns out it's red meat, it's organ meats, it's fish and shellfish, and it's things like asparagus and spinach. There's a few vegetables that are like powerhouses for nutrient density, and so we list those. We list the powerhouses for nutrient density from animal sourced foods, and then you can come up with a little matrix if you were to take animal food, plant food, herb, spice, and a fat, and make a little matrix. And if you didn't like that combination, you wouldn't have to eat it again for another 105 years. So I think it's important to kind of remove your bias and just look at humans as an animal that needs a very wide variety of nutrition inputs, and how can we get that best through food.
Awesome. And what are your thoughts on organ meats? I struggle to eat them just because I don't like the taste of them. So I do have to lean more towards supplementation. Allie Miller taught me you could take 2/3 of like ground beef and then 1/3 of the organ and mix it together. I see the value of so many amino acids, but do you feel like we all should be experimenting with organ meats?
Yeah, it's really the iron that you can get from liver that even if you were to eat red meat 3 times a day, it's very unlikely that you'd be getting your even RDA for iron. And so it's, liver is just so nutrient dense. I also can't stand the taste of it myself. So I will get it in a blend with ground meat, or you can take desiccated liver tablets, grass-fed liver tablets, which is what I also do.
Yeah. Yeah. When Paul taught me that, I was like, okay, I can do that. That can work.
Yeah. But you need quite a few of them. Some people will freeze it too. They'll like chop it into little pieces and freeze it and then swallow frozen liver.
I guess I could do that. I can usually do anything for health, but that one is just like, I can't.
It's really hard for me too. I think, for those of us, the idea of eating an egg, if you didn't eat an egg growing up, like think about how gross it could seem to eat like a sunny side up egg. Right?
Where it's runny. Yeah. Yeah. And this is a really interesting question. And then I want to move on to the ethical piece. Mm-hmm. I personally love my meat, my red meat, rare, and my family makes fun of me. And I'm like, but I can taste it that way. And it seems to me, if you cook the heck out of it, I've lost some nutrients. Do you lose any of those as you cook it longer?
Well, for example, vitamin C is really high in liver, but when you cook anything with vitamin C, it destroys the vitamin C. So the best way, I think, to get vitamin C is from citrus foods, and leafy parsley actually is, and red peppers are really high in vitamin C. So that's just one of the reasons why I think it's just a good idea if you see your body as like a portfolio, to just invest a little bit in each category and not put everything in one bucket that has never been tested throughout time. So that's just my opinion on that. Wait, what was your question again?
Cooking, so when we cook
cooking your meat, yeah.
And like even with eggs, if you cook it longer, are you destroying some of the nutrients in it?
You can oxidize the fats in eggs if you overcook eggs. And so it is like, if you're going to make scrambled eggs, to leave them a little on the more runny side is better. Yep. Or to have your yolk a little more runny is definitely better, because there are some delicate fats in eggs. The polyunsaturated fats are, can be damaged when you cook them at high temperatures.
Right.
As far as meat protein goes, you're not really going to make too much of a damage by cooking it longer. The minerals aren't going to be damaged. It's really some of those vitamins that could be damaged, but they're probably going to be damaged either way. So I don't know. I mean, you don't want to char it, right? Because the Maillard reaction, that black stuff that you get when you grill, that is carcinogenic, but that doesn't mean meat is carcinogenic. It just means the Maillard reaction is carcinogenic. And as far as bacteria, because a lot of people are worried about E. coli or something like that, it is a concern with ground meat. So you do technically want to cook burgers through.
Interesting.
Because, unless you really trust the source, I suppose, but the E. coli from the intestines can get on the surfaces of the meat, and when it gets ground, it can get ground into meat, and other bacteria can get ground in there. When you're looking at a steak, though, you would be cooking the edges, the outsides, and so E. coli can't get in to, like, it doesn't burrow down into like a worm or something like that. So you're safe that way.
Yeah, that's a bummer because I like my burgers rare.
I do too.
So
it's not as safe. That's all I'm saying. It's not as safe. I'm not guaranteeing you're going to get sick, but it's not as safe.
Yeah. Okay, let's move to the ethical piece. And this is the one that gets everybody fighting, which is it's cruel to kill animals and eat them.
Yeah. So this is what I brought up a little bit before, is there is no food system where there's no death. Like, just, there is not. Whether you intended it to die or not, it's going to die. So even if you didn't want it to die, I'm telling you it's dying and you are culpable. So that just won't hold up in court. You didn't want it to happen, right? So little critters are dying. Whole ecosystems are getting destroyed by everything we eat. All right. And so the only solution we have is to make sure that the life that is giving itself up for you was raised in a good way, had a low stress death, and is, contributing to ecosystem function. And that's why I think, one large ruminant, if you're thinking about how does my diet cause the least amount of harm, if a mammal is a mammal and a mouse is the same as a cow, one cow can provide almost 500 pounds of meat. Wow. So if you had a cow grazing a pasture that was building soil health, that was attracting pollinators, that was improving the biome of the soil, increasing the water holding capacity, making that ecosystem less susceptible to droughts, all these great things that were, attracting more life and building life, then that one death can feed your family for a year, right? Or longer. Yeah. If we're looking at our typical agriculture system, so many things are sprayed on those fields, killing, everything in its path, including leaching into the waterways, killing the fish, killing the bears that need to eat that fish, creating dead zones in the Gulf of Mexico. Even on an organic farm, there are organic pesticides. There's still death happening there. If you eat bread, what do you think happens around granaries? Do you think they just let the rats and mice come and eat everything? No, they're spraying like crazy to try to keep all those critters away, or else we would not have any grain stores at all. They would just be eaten by rodents. In restaurants. I mean, so I think if you're truly looking to cause the least amount of harm, which is completely noble and honorable to do, you would source your food from a regenerative farm and include animal source foods in your diet.
Yeah. How do you find a regenerative farm? Is there, like, if I walk into Whole Foods, there's really, I don't know what I'm getting.
Yeah. So visiting a farm, if you have the ability to do that, is really ideal. But I understand not everybody can do that. So, but checking out a farm, seeing if they're moving their animals and the animal isn't just stationary on the same patch of grass all summer long. In the film, we show the difference. And so
Awesome.
would, if you watch the film or read the book, you would understand what we're talking about and what to look for on a farm. It's a little tricky. There are labels coming out for regenerative meats, but even grass-fed, not necessarily regenerative, but it's still a better step in the right direction. Feed your family well. I still think red meat is just so important to our vitality and to, especially, to growing children and pregnant and nursing women, that get the best meat you can afford to get. If you don't have a big budget, maybe it's grass-fed ground meat or organ meats, and less of the, fancier steaks or something like that. But it's certainly going to give you, per calorie, a lot more bang for your buck than any plant-sourced foods.
Okay. Yeah. It's interesting. Paul Saladino, I was going to tell you this in the last comment on the ethical piece. When I asked him, I said, I gave him a question of, if you were sitting at a dinner table next to a vegan, and the vegan said, "Oh my God, I can't believe you wrote a book called The Carnivore Code and you're all meat. Like what, and you're arguing over ethics. What would you tell that vegan?" And what he said was that your human existence is happening right now. You are alive right now because your ancestors ate meat. That we literally could not, the human evolution of humans could not have happened if we had not been able to eat meat.
Yeah. And I think that also goes back to the anthropology discussion that you brought up in the way beginning, that we see meat eating as something that's primitive and barbaric and too animalistic, right? And we don't want to think of ourselves as animals. But there are certain primal pieces of us that are undeniable, right? How we reproduce, what we need to eat, our basic needs here on this planet are not going to change. and we can't sort of intellectualize ourselves away from that. And all life requires death. You cannot have new life without death. And so if we're just think of all things as just molecules in cycles, we go back and then new life happens because of us. And so if you, again, just, I think that we're very afraid of death. I think even in the health community, people are afraid of death. That's why longevity, give me anything that'll keep me alive the longest. Not about quality of life. It's about, I need to live the longest, cheat death. Only like 30% of Americans have wills, something like that. So,
wow.
Yeah. We don't want to talk about death. We don't want to know it happens. We don't want to know animals died for our food. We don't want to think of ourselves as animals. And we've just, really removed ourselves so much from just the natural cycles of the world. And it's really sad.
Yeah, fascinating. So let's finish up with this. I've got 5 specific questions for you that around your mission and what you're doing. My first question is, if you and I are in line at a grocery store and I find out you wrote this amazing book and you have amazing programs to help people, it sounds like you have an amazing CSA, and I asked you, what was the perfect human diet? What would you say?
Plant-based plus meat.
Ah, interesting. You went that way. So tell me more. What does plant-based plus meat mean? Eat a lot of veggies and have your meat too?
Just, eat a wide variety of whole foods as diverse in colors and plants and animals as possible that you can tolerate. So for me, it's a little more narrow than for other people. But people seem to, I also try to avoid conflicts and polarization, and I'm really trying to get everyone on the same page. And so when you start with plant-based plus meat, people seem to be able to digest that a little bit better. And especially, when you're talking to women who have more emotion around food than men do, I think it's really important to honor triggers and to enter discussions from a place of sensitivity.
Yeah, I love that. I love your approach. I've had some vegetarians over the years that I've coached back to health, and I've asked them, could you have your vegetarian days and then you have your days that you add some meat in for your own health? And something about phrasing it that way is like, you don't need to give up this identity of being a vegetarian. You just need to add some meat in some days. And it seems to work. So I love the plant-based and with some meat. Smart. I love it. Mm-hmm. Okay, my second question. This is a deep one. When I'm listening to Robert Kennedy Jr., Zach Bush, even Kiss the Ground, there's a lot of talk about if we don't get this regenerative agricultural situation, we don't get our soils back where they need to be, we don't bring more regenerative farms in, that the humans, that we're close to extinction. Do you feel like we're heading towards extinction if we don't turn this around?
I used to very much use that scare tactic in my marketing, and I try to also avoid that now too. I think that it's not necessary, and I think we need to look at health first, and how do we fix our human health, because that's actually, to me, a bigger crisis right now, is our failing health, and the fact that there's so many people who are so misinformed and misled by our broken food system, and with diabetes and obesity and everything. Like, let's fix that first, and get a handle on ourselves as humans, and then we can tackle the environment. The environment that's a big, fixing our soils. What is someone in New York City who, has a job and 2 kids, how are they going to fix soil? Right. Like that's like another way of sort of not actually dealing with anything.
Yeah.
And blaming others instead of taking it on yourself.
Yeah.
So.
When I find when people are overwhelmed, they just shut down and then there's no action. And that's not where we want people to be. One of the things that this year really brought to my attention was like, why aren't we talking about why so many people are immune compromised? Can we stop arguing about masks and sheltering in place? And can we, like, if there's anything that this year has taught us is that we have this immune compromised world. Why aren't we doing, what are we doing to fix that? And that has been one of my big messages. So when you say, why aren't we addressing the poor health of people? What do you think? Is there one or two things you could say was at the root of that?
I actually think that nutrition is the biggest driver of health, period. And that access to animal source foods for people who are food insecure is also at the top of that eating nutrient poor foods is the problem. And I mean, they taste good, they're cheap, they're accessible. They're a sign that you've made it in a lot of cultures, right? Is to eat that Western type diet. And so I'm really on a mission. You know, I'm coming up with this impact campaign out of my film to really debunk the meat vilification of meat to women and children and make sure that animal source foods are something that are presented as a healthy food source for women and children in particular.
I love that. I love that. So, okay, my next question is also a deep one here. So you have this mission and you can see it just in your book, you go to your Instagram, like you can tell, and we love mission-based people, like how you show up in the world. I just want to applaud you because it's inspiring. If there is one person you could sit and have a conversation with that is probably blocking your mission, that's on the other side of your mission, who would that be, and what kind of conversation would you want to have with them? And it could be a corporation that's doing this as well.
I would sit down with Bill Gates.
Awesome. Why?
He is a major investor in plant-based proteins. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation just published a paper out of India showing that vegetarian women were healthier than meat-eating women when it wasn't adjusted for socioeconomic status, which we know that the upper class people in India are, more leaning towards Hindu and more plant-based, and the meat eaters are the lower class folks, the lower castes. He doesn't seem to have the right message behind why regenerative agriculture is important and why animal source foods are critical to human health and especially to food insecure people. I feel like if I was just able to sit down with him, I might be able to sway him back. And I do plan on sitting down with a lot of policymakers, showing them this film, getting the book in their hands, and trying to make really big policy impacts when it comes to nutrient-dense food and better agriculture systems.
I just love that. I hope you get to sit down with him. I would love to be a fly on the wall. I love that vision. Okay, let's go back. I got two more questions for you. Let's go back to to Bill Schindler, who you have to meet. We're going to find a way for you guys to connect because you just have, your missions are so lined up. So one of the things that he talked about is that when he butchers an animal, he brings it into his kitchen, puts it on the countertop, and he involves his children in butchering it, not only from we're going to use all parts of this animal, but from a gratitude place of just giving thanks to the animal and what it's gave its life for our human health. What messaging do you feel like we need to get across to our children, and specifically when it comes to meat? Like, how can, as mothers are listening to this, what is the messaging that we need to change so kids can have a greater appreciation of good food?
It's funny, when my daughter was 7, and I have the story in my book, and I'll try to tell it really fast. But I have this blog post called "It's Impossible to Be Vegan." And what happened was, she was on a play date. We live outside of Boston in kind of like a suburb with lots of educated parents all trying to do the right thing. A lot of them don't eat very much meat. Anyhow, so she's on a play date. They're out by our pond, and they come running back in. Oh my God, it's a massacre. And so I come walking back out with them, and there was a sheep that clearly a coyote like had a party with, and there was just bloody wool, and it was disgusting to look at, right? And these poor girls are only 7, or maybe she was 10 at the time. She was 10, but still little. And I said, okay, well, it looks like a coyote got one of our sheep, and we try to protect them, but it happens sometimes. But that coyote needs to eat too. And the coyote wasn't bad for eating. The coyote needs to feed its babies too. And this is just what happens sometimes. And the rest of that sheep is going to go into our compost pile, and we're going to turn that into healthy soil that then is going to go on our vegetable fields and grow better kale.
I love that.
And she said, wait, so can you taste the bones? And we said, no, you can't taste it, but the calcium from the bones of that sheep are actually going to go into the kale. And she's like, oh, so it's just all recycled? And we were like, yeah. And she's like, you mean, so it's impossible to be a vegan? And we're like, yes. So, there's a book out, there's a children's book called Everybody's Somebody's Lunch. And it talks a lot about that too, about, everything is eaten and eats and is eaten, right? That, something eats a plant, but then something else eats that animal. And it's not a hierarchy necessarily, it's a circle, and everything is intertwined within this circle, and humans are just a piece. We're not at the top of the pyramid. We're just a piece of the circle. And I think that more kids need to understand that we just have a place, that we need to, have a little more humility, and that we're just a piece of this, and not any more or any less important than everything else. That's what I would do.
That's a great story. I love it. I love that. And it's just, what I'm hearing consistently from you is that we can't take things at surface level. We need to start thinking deeper about these values that we hold so true in our heart, but maybe we haven't really fully looked deep enough to understand that there is like you said, there's a place here where we can all coexist and appreciate all aspects of nutrition, except McDonald's, perhaps. The last question, and this is what I ask everybody. So if there was one message you could get into every human's brain, like one line, couple lines, like what would that message be about? It could be about health. It could be about life. It could be about the environment.
Yeah, that we're, I mean, in 50 years, I'm not going to be here. Right. And so I am trying to just do the right thing with my time here. And I'm pretty passionate. I love talking to people who are just passionate about whatever they're doing. So whether that's an artist or curing a weird disease or, whatever it is, like go for whatever you're doing with all of your positive energy. And so I happen to be really, really obsessed with making sure that people have access to nutrients and are not being told wrong information based on sort of a quasi-religious bias. Because it's really harmful to our health and to our environment. But I wish there were more people that I had access to on a regular basis that had passions where they felt as, fulfilled with the mission that they're doing as I do.
Yeah. I always tell my kids, my daughter's 20, my son's 18, and I always tell them the quote, and I forget who said it, that don't think about what the world needs. Think about what lights you up, because what the world needs is more people that are lit up. And you know, you use the word passion. It really is true. When you step into your passion, life is a whole lot more fun. You're a happier person, and everybody wins because of that. So this was amazing. I was thinking as you were talking, so I started this carnivore discussion back in April with Maria Emmerich. And literally in April, I was like, carnivore? I ate meat, but I was like anti-carnivore. Then I morphed that discussion to Paul Saladino, who, you know, his beliefs. Then I morphed it to Bill Schindler, who really believes in fermenting foods and really appreciating the whole animal and going back to some more ancestral roots. And then you're sort of the final piece. I have some great conversations coming up with people about regenerative soil. And I love how you have accomplished that middle ground. I love the inclusiveness of your mission and your message. So thank you. This was really enjoyable. And let me know, what can we do to support you? Our resetters are passionate about health, their own health, the world's health. How can we support your movie? How can we support your book? Because I know there's a lot of people listening that would like to get on your mission.
Yeah, so we're actually going to be releasing the film for free November 22nd through the 30th. So my thought there was that's Thanksgiving week. And there's a lot of tense family discussions that happen. There's also a little bit of downtime where people can take the time to watch a movie, maybe while they're traveling or while they're digesting their food. And I think that, you know, there really hasn't been a film talking about the other side of the plant-based argument. And not that my film is a rebuttal at all, because we actually say in the film, it seems like some people can do okay on a vegan diet, but I think that we're arguing about the wrong thing. Nick Offerman says that right in the beginning of the film. So he was the narrator. So people might know him as Ron Swanson from Parks and Rec.
Oh my gosh. Yes,
so he's a huge friend of the project. It was a passion project that took me a long time to make, and I did not pay myself while I was working on it. So watch it for free. We're putting it out there. We do have, you know, after you watch the film, you'll have the ability to buy all of the interviews, or a course that I made called Meat Curious, where I thoughtfully walk people through the nutrition, environment, and ethical case for why it's okay to eat meat. And we have a lot of testimonials from ex-vegans who went back to eating meat and just telling their stories in that. And we're also raising money for an impact campaign, because I want to go to schools and conferences and really bring this message to everyone, from animal scientists who have a hard time talking to non-scientists about what they do, to college students who are super passionate but maybe a little bit misled by the plant-based movement. Let's just have a discussion about this in an intelligent way. So watch my film, read some of the you know, contradictory information, and then let's have a conversation about it. And then my book is meant to be a companion to the film, so Sacred Cow. And I'm on Instagram at Sustainable Dish, and I also do nutrition consults. So those are all the ways people can reach out and support my work. And thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, we'll put all the links. Is the movie, is it like on Netflix, or do we have to go to a website to see it?
So the free launch is right at sacredcow.info. And people can just register right there with their email address, and they'll get a link to watch the film for free. And they'll be able to share that with their friends and everything, but it's only 1 week. And then after that, it's going to be probably starting in the new year, it'll be available on mainstream platforms, and we're negotiating right now with everybody. So I don't know which one's going to have it first, but it will be out there probably for a fee initially, you know, starting this winter.
Awesome. Beautiful. Well, keep up your passion. This was incredible, Diana. I appreciate you taking so much time and letting me kind of walk through the different thought processes that I know my resetters are having, and just grateful for everything you're doing. So we will get the movie out, we'll get the book out, and we'll keep preaching this message. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.